Hey review family, keep it tight. My name is Andrei Marasoiu again, and I'm back again to bring you another video, and in this one I'm going to be reviewing the new Fever 333 album entitled Strength in Numbers, but you get it? There's threes in the title. Fever 333 is a rapcore and a post-hardcore band that was formed in 2017 and fronted by Jason Allen Butler, the previous vocalist of Let Live. And before we get into anything for this review, this is one of the most heavily requested albums for me to review that I've ever had on the channel. And not only that, it was on the list already for me to review, but the sheer acclaim that I have heard for this album going into it through many different sources and many different groups that I'm in, even some metalheads and like metal groups saying you really gotta check this album out. It really is mind-blowing and it's great and all of that. I've been hearing tons of talk about it, tons of encouraging talk, so I went ahead and sped along the process of checking it out, and here we are with the review. So without a doubt, I can definitely see why so many people are digging into this album. It truly is one of the most energy-filled albums that I have heard. It is super exuberant and it's super raw with the energy, but the influences, in my opinion, do bleed through quite prominently, especially in the choruses where you get a lot of those Chester Bennington vibes, and overall this whole album has two big major influences that I can personally hear, one being Linkin Park, one being Rage Against the Machine, and I think those can bleed and show in between the lines as you dig into this album quite prominently, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, and I'm in no way calling them a copycat. This isn't like Greta Van Fleet and Led Zeppelin. This is literally just an influence and something that I kind of do have to point out because of how prominent it is, but they do really have their own sound, and I don't want to discredit them whatsoever with that. So for me, I'll go into like my least favorite and my favorite things about the album. I think that one of the best things is how energy-filled it is, like I said, and the timbre of Jason's voice sounds great. The raw aggression on this track listing is great. Some of the tracks on this album are absolutely breathtaking and amazing. I will get into those later, but the complete magnitude of this project from start to finish does feel a little bit inconsistent for me when it comes to my personal enjoyment. Some of the lyrics are amazing. They're really good. They're well tailored. They sound like they're revolutionary. They sound like they're trying to change the world. They speak about some very serious, introspective topics, not only for Jason, but for the world in general, and I really love those lyrics and the way they are written, but the reason it's a mixed bag is because sometimes the lyrics that are presented can be in a very simplistic way, and simplicity is not necessarily a bad thing, but when it's phrased in such a way that you feel like you've heard it 1,000 times before, it's harder to get a serious topic across, and I feel bad for saying that, but that's just true for me. John Feldman produced this album alongside Travis Barker, the drummer for Blink-182, and that's something I gotta compliment. Is the production sounds amazing on this track listing. There's a lot of really interesting sound play, and nothing really drowns anything out, so I gotta compliment that. I don't think it's too overly produced for the topics, but I think that it's produced enough to sound very clean and very pristine. This is obviously Roadrunner Records, so it's not some underground label. I do feel like the instrumentation on this album can feel a little bit status quo and run-of-the-mill by kind of rapcore and post-hardcore standards, but maybe that's just because there's so many bands that are popping up in the 2010s, not only in heavy metal, but also in the hip-hop and rap underground, that are adopting this sound of kind of heavy metal, as well as trap kind of coming in with it, and the rapcore aesthetic that was popular in the 2000s, bringing in some new metal stuff. There's some new metal influences on this, metalcore influences on this, and there's a lot of bands that are kind of doing this and a lot of artists that are doing this in the 2010s, so maybe that's just this band, Fever 333, coming a little bit late to the party in my mind, but for what they're doing, I think that they are one of the better ones that I have heard in quite a long time. Looking into this album's flow, the flows are very good on this album, straight up. They're really nice flows, and the choruses are very well performed in terms of the singing, and overall the singing on this album I don't really have anything to complain about, other than the fact that it can feel a little metalcore and post-hardcore status quo when you get the verses, and that it just explodes into these boombastic choruses that recalls a lot of the work like Chester Bennington, like I said earlier, and that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that in general, that it does explode into choruses that can feel a bit too melodramatic and theatrical given the tracks, especially when you're going for more of a low-key emotional thing or a rap verse, and then it's just exploding. But that's one of the issues with rapcore in general, is it's hard to balance it out. But for the most part, I think that they do it pretty well. Like, the choruses on Burn It and Animal and Inglewood work out very well in my opinion, and on that topic I'll talk about Burn It, which is the second track in the track listing, but it's technically the first because there's a little bit of an introduction. This has such intensity to it, such forcefulness, such vigor to the entire song, and the chorus, although it does explode like some of my least favorite ones on the track listing, it still works very well. Same with Animal. The choruses, while they do feel a little bit overblown and retched by the standards of the album, considering how low-key but still aggressive some of the verses can be, that's some of my issue with this album, but it still works out well in my opinion when you have this much energy and this much just complete passion going into it. And I don't think anyone can deny this album has some great passion on it, especially through the lyrics and the performances. The instrumental performances aren't blowing me away on this album. The vocals are what shines. Jason comes through with such raw passion throughout his vocals, through these growls to these screams to raps to singing, and he really gives it his all. You can tell that he cares about what he is rapping or singing or growling, screaming about. Whatever he's doing, you can tell that he genuinely does care about what he's doing and what he's talking about and the stories he's trying to convey, and I can respect that a lot. My favorite track on the album is Inglewood. This is 7 minutes and 1 second, and it's the 6th track, and I adore this track. This goes to show that I really didn't know what to expect with this album, because up to this point it was super balls to the wall, it was super heavy, it was like, oh my god, this is so insane, and when you get something like One of Us coming up in the track listing before it, where it's just like heavy balls to the wall, and then you get Inglewood, it's so sweet, and the chorus is beautiful on this track, and it's so emotionally poignant, especially the verses, talking about some very serious things about his past and how he was born and the backstory about his brother and his father and things like that. And this is filled out with some amazing lyrics. For it being 7 minutes, it doesn't feel like it drags on too long. It feels like it's there the perfect length. And then in the second back half of this track, you get heavy vocals and heavy instrumentation, and it really breaks up a lot. It doesn't stick to one thing. That was one thing I was kind of worried about, is for it being 7 minutes, was it going to like be too long and be the same thing for the rest of it? But this really does change up a lot. It has my favorite chorus on the album, and it's definitely my favorite song on the album. Cootie Talk ends out the album off on a completely explosive note at 4 minutes. Definitely a highlight as well. This sounds like post-hardcore, and this sounds like metalcore. It sounds super heavy, talking about some very interesting things on this track. The raw aggression, I gotta compliment again on Jason's voice, and there's nothing I can complain about as this for an album ender. I think it works out very well for ending off the album on a high note. I feel like I didn't from top to bottom enjoy and feel all critically acclaimed for this album as much as a lot of other people did, but I can definitely understand why this album is getting so much acclaim as a debut album. I mean, the EP had a song, I forget the song, back in 2018, it got nominated for Best Rock Song. I mean, that's pretty impressive, I gotta say, and for the most part, Fever 333 is doing something very interesting, and although it's not my favorite sound that I've ever heard, and it can feel like kind of like an amalgamation of the influences that are going into it, I think that it works out well for the most part, and I did enjoy this for the most part, and there are some tracks that I'm a bit iffy on that feel a bit kind of compared to others, but this definitely isn't a boring track listing, and the performance from the vocalist really does give it a lot of spark and a lot of life and a lot of theatrical energy to it, and yeah, I mean, I definitely enjoyed this album, and I'm glad that I checked it out, so I'm going to be giving this album a 7 out of 10. Yeah, that feels right. Is that a wrap? I think that's a wrap. Have you guys heard this album? If you have, you can go ahead and post in the comment section below and tell me what you thought, or you can go listen to it and come back and tell me. Like, comment, subscribe, it helps me out a lot. Smash that notification bell to be notified of my future uploads, and I will talk to you guys next time. But until then, my name is J More Serve You Guy, and I'm signing off saying farewell.